All right, it's been a while since I've done an advice from dad video, and I've got a great question from a follower who happens to be a single mother. She asked a terrific question, and I thought it deserved an answer. So let's dive in. She wrote, "Hello, I follow you. I am a single mom with a 17-year-old son. His dad wants zero to do with him. I am trying to raise my son knowing things that men should know. I have the sex ed, changing a tire, and that type of thing down. But I don't know what I don't know. Could you maybe do a video on something to help us out so that we are raising decent men that won't be taken advantage of?" First off, let me say kudos to you for asking a question that most single moms will never ask. And I also want to point out something else that you said in your question that indicates to me that you're a terrific mom. The fact that you admitted that you don't know what you don't know. That right there tells me you care about your son and you want what's best for him. And I wanted to be sure to point that out. So let me answer the question that you're asking and try and help you in the best way I can. And I'm going to be upfront with you. I could spend about 3 hours answering this question. I could write a book on it. In fact, maybe I will. But I've got 4 key points that I think will help you to raise your son and help him to be the best man he can be. First and foremost, a common mistake that I see single mothers make is they try and make their son the quote-unquote man of the house. Please don't do that. Don't tell him that either. Now, your son's a little older at 17, but I've seen 6 and 7-year-old boys get told this. And it may not seem like it's that big a deal. To women, it may even seem like you're praising the boy, trying to uplift him. But the reality is, for many boys, it puts a ton of pressure on them. They feel like they have to replace their father. They're little boys. They don't have to replace their father, nor should they. Being the man of the house is a tremendous responsibility at any age, whether it's your 17-year-old son or the aforementioned 6-year-old. Just skip that part. It really isn't going to benefit him in any way to tell him that he's the man of the house now. Another key thing that many women and single moms miss is that boys react much differently than girls to things like boundaries and discipline. A key thing that many aren't aware of is that moms and dads set boundaries differently. Moms tend to have more boundaries than dads. But, and here's a key point, moms often don't enforce the boundaries that they have, whereas dads are much more strict with the boundaries they set. Now, I'm not saying one's better than the other. The truth of the matter is, I believe kids need both. When parents work together, they get the strengths of the mom setting the boundaries and the strength of the dad holding the kids to them. And I know, there's a bunch of you going, but, not me. The exceptions prove the rule. There are no hard and fast rules here. It is a gray area. But the key takeaway to get from it is that boys need very strict boundaries, and they need them enforced. Boys are much bigger risk takers than girls. And believe me, you're looking at one of the best at taking risks in life, especially as a boy and a teenager. And let me tell you, I did some pretty stupid shit back in the day. Stuff my mom had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And when I told her years later, she sat in denial going, "You couldn't possibly have done that. I would have known." Well, I did, and then some. Because I grew up without my dad in the home, and my mother did everything she could to keep me away from him. But to his credit, what little time that we had together, he did try and enforce boundaries. And he was very strict about them. Pretty much it was screw up and you're done. One chance only. Again, I'm not saying moms are bad or dads are bad. I'm just simply acknowledging reality. And the reality that boys need those boundaries and need to be held accountable to them. You can do more for your boy doing that than honestly pretty much anything else. At least in my opinion. Another strong suggestion I would have, you want to have conversations with him about how society is perceiving him in particular and men in general. You absolutely need to teach him to respect women. No ifs, ands, or buts on that. But you also need to teach him to respect himself. Let me tell you, as many of you who follow me know, I coach guys. And the number one problem I see, the one that creates all the issues they face later in life, is more often than not that they don't respect themselves. They were taught to respect women, but they never learned how to respect themselves. And again, I'm not blaming them, and I'm not blaming the mothers either. I think that's one thing that dads do much better than moms do, is teach boys how to respect themselves and set, for example, their own boundaries, their own ambitions. their own goals. You need to also understand he's getting bombarded daily with negative messages directed at him. He's told day after day how awful men are, how bad they are, how violent they are. You need to explain to him that yes, there are some bad men out there and some bad women. But just because there are bad men out there doesn't mean he needs to accept responsibility for their behavior. The reality is it's very, very few men that are bad. It's only about 0.2%. Yet he hears every single day, it's all men till it's no men. He's bombarded in the media, told he's a buffoon. He's to blame for all of society's ills. And of course, he needs to accept responsibility for the quote-unquote patriarchy. Things that happened hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, long before he was born. Boys are bombarded with that from the time they're born, and it creates a host of issues for them. Your son's a little bit older, but the reality is right now at his age, in my opinion, is when it peaks the most. He's trying to figure out his way in life. He's about to become an adult. He doesn't really understand what that means in the context of society, especially when he's told he serves no purpose, that he's not needed, that he's not wanted. You need to sit him down and have an honest conversation with him about that and explain to him the reality that he does matter. All men matter every bit as much as women do. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm sure you'll have that conversation, but the truth of the matter is it would be much better if that conversation came from another man, which leads me to my fourth and final point. As you said earlier, you don't know what you don't know. And I'll be honest with you, the same applies to me. I don't know what mothers know, and I can't teach that to my girls. That's mothers' jobs, and it's fathers' jobs to teach what they know to boys. In your case, the dad is absent, and I'm sorry that that's the case. But let's move past that. My advice to you is to get other men in his life. Men that can interact with him, talk to him, have those conversations with him. Because one thing that women really struggle to understand is that men communicate much differently than women. Women like to communicate face to face. That doesn't work with most men. We communicate quote unquote shoulder to shoulder. We communicate while doing things. We don't sit, have coffee, and chat for hours. Sure, we may have a beer, and yes, I was a dad who let my 17-year-old sons have a beer once in a while. Sue me. But we'll be doing things. We might be doing things like shooting hoops. That's when I often talk to my oldest son. We might shoot hoops for an hour, and we might only have one 5-minute conversation in that hour. But that 5-minute conversation was the one that needed to be had and helped him along. It's an innate thing for men to be able to communicate that way. It's not something I feel women can do any more than men can communicate the way women do. Again, it's not a knock on either. It's reality, and we need to accept reality. The other thing is these men can also be a role model for him. Sure, you're trying to be a role model as a mom, but again, boys see it differently. Boys react differently to men than they do women. Now, where can you find a man? Well, it's different for everybody. It could be a trusted male family member, perhaps an uncle, grandfather, cousin. It could be someone like a clergyman, a minister, a priest, a rabbi. You could look into things like Big Brother or get involved in sports and then have a conversation with the coach. One of the things I did back in the day when I coached Little League and Pop Warner was the boys that were from single mothers, I tended to interact with a bit more after practice and just have conversations with them. Make myself available to them to answer any questions they might have. Questions they would never in a million years ask their mom. Again, there's many different places you can look, but do your best to find a man or a couple of men that can interact with your son and be that role model he needs. Again, I want to give you a shout out because you're doing what you need to do to raise your son. You asked a question that many moms will never ask. And as I said earlier, kudos to you for doing so. I hope this video helps. As I said earlier, I could spend 3 hours on this topic. And to anyone else watching this, jump in the comments and add what you think. Let's hear your suggestions to help this mom raise her son.